I'm Abby. I have a lot of records. Welcome to Miami Beach, ladies and gentlemen. Everything is cheaper than it looks. So welcome back, or welcome if this is your first time here. Vinyl Monday is the who, what, when, where, why, and how do I feel about classic albums in my collection. If TV show length episodes aren't your thing, don't worry. I also do Vinyl Monday in 60 seconds, here on my channel, over on my Instagram, as well as TikTok. One quick announcement before we start. The Dolls podcast returns on Friday with, drumroll please, is me drumming on my knee, the Beetle Girl miniseries. The next 6 episodes of the podcast will be about 5 of the Fab Four's wives. This idea came up around the last season finale. I'm so glad that Emma is so enthusiastic about this and a 2-part season finale. The first part of our Beetle Girl miniseries will be out this Friday at noon wherever you stream your podcasts. I can't wait to see your guesses as to who we're covering in the comments. On to this week's album. This is kind of my birthday episode, but also kind of not. You're obviously seeing this in the future. I film these a decent chunk of time ahead, but in any way, this is the last video I'm filming as a 25-year-old. This album is celebrating a birthday too. This week we're celebrating the 50th anniversary of Neil Young, Tonight's the Night. Congrats to those who guessed this one. Remember, if you want to play along, all you gotta do is check out my post tab. That's where I post hints to what the next album is gonna be. I make announcements, I host polls. You can find all of that on my channel. And if you so choose, you can always read the written versions of my reviews on my website, linked in the description. All right, let's take the plastic off. So my copy is an original, as far as I know. I had 2 copies at one point, I let go of the other. This is the one I kept. Now this is one of my favorite album packages in rock and roll. There's so many extras and weird little Easter eggs in here. This packaging is just great. Of all 40-something of Neil's album covers, this one is his favorite. The cover photo was taken by Dutch photographer Gisbert Hennekroot. In this shot, Neil's at the mic under a harsh stage light, harmonica around his neck, wearing sunglasses indoors, very rock star of him, a Tinkerbell t-shirt, and an ugly seersucker jacket he stole from Nils Lofgren. This is what happens when men dress themselves. Early copies, like mine, were printed on blotter paper. It was meant to decay over time. This actually wasn't the first time Neil played with an idea like this, or at least wanted to. The Harvest art was supposed to be biodegradable, but Reprise put the kibosh on that. It'd be way too expensive. Remarkably, as B-roll Abby will be showing you right about now, my printed inner sleeve and fold-out insert are still intact. Neil's on one side of the sleeve, the rest of his group are on the other. Each guy's name is written under where he stands on stage. There is a lot going on this little insert, including but not limited to a negative review of the Tonight's the Night tour by Constant Mayers. It is all in Dutch. Neil's 1948 Buick, the album credits of On the Beach, the words to Florida off Homegrown.
These guys flying around in gliders, and they swoop between them.
And a photo of Roy Orbison, because why not? A baggie of glitter was meant to be included, but again, Reprise said no, this glitter would have gotten all over the place in shipping. And to think Neil Young almost invented the glitter bomb. He does contribute vocals, guitar, piano, harmonica, and allegedly vibraphone on New Mama, but I have never been able to hear it. On Tonight's the Night, Neil is joined by Crazy Horse. Sort of. We have Billy Talbot on bass and Ralph Molina on drums, plus Nils Lofgren on piano, backing vocals, and guitar. They are joined by some former Stray Gators. Ben Keith on steel guitar and backing vocals. Jack Nitschke plays keys on Come On Baby Let's Go Downtown and Lookout Joe. And Tim Drummond plays the bass on Lookout Joe. We also have a posthumous appearance by Danny Whitten. He plays guitar and sings lead on Come On Baby Let's Go Downtown. down. On the inner sleeve, Danny's name appears under an empty space on stage. He's physically gone, but he's always there. Tonight's the Night was produced by Neil Young with David Briggs and Elliot Mazer. Roll transition. Elliot Roberts said, "No, not that Elliot Roberts. Though if he ever wants to collab, I'm totally down. It would be objectively really funny to have Walmart George and Walmart Patty in the same video." What was I even on about? From Asylum Records founder Elliot Roberts, quote, "Whenever Neil's had a big success, he's had to do something to counter it or he can't appreciate it. His whole life, after every big album, he'll do something insane, like put on blackface and do a minstrel show. Alright, why don't you at Joni Mitchell next time? Though I miss the anniversaries of all the other Ditch Trilogy albums, I never said I was good with numbers, we're picking up about where we left off with Neil 2 years ago. His commercial aha moment, Harvest. This hit at just the right time. Pop music wasn't sick of country rock yet. People were still feeling sweet about the Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young days, but he felt he was writing safe music. So, as he famously put, he headed for the ditch. To Cream in November of 1975, he said, quote, "I just didn't feel like I was a lonely figure with a guitar, or whatever the trip is that people see me as sometimes." Like on Harvest, quote, "I didn't feel that laid back. So I thought I'd just forget about all that and wipe it out. Be aggressive and be abrasive in the wiping of that, as so I could leave an effect." It wasn't as simple as the music. Spoiler alert, it literally never is. 1972 through 1973 turned Neil's life upside down. Through this time, he happened to make deliberately rough, uncut material unsuitable for radio play. It mirrored the turbulence in his own life. It started with joyful turbulence, though. Neil became a father. In September of 72, him and his girl / A Man Needs a Maid muse, Carrie Snodgrass, welcomed a baby boy. Becoming a first-time parent completely changes your worldview, but Neil didn't really have time to process that. He had the biggest album of his career on his hands, and Reprise was to send him out on tour in support of it. Neil really wanted Danny Whitten to be part of this. It's no secret Crazy Horse is Neil's favorite backing band he's ever had. They just gel together. The Stray Gators just weren't giving him the sonic edge he wanted. In his mind, Danny could. So Neil invited him out to the ranch for rehearsals for this tour. It might help him out some. Danny wasn't doing so well. It didn't help. Neil did everything in his power to get his friend involved and with it, but it became clear they'd hit a wall. Danny was too high to function. Neil had no choice but to fire him. He got the news that soon after Danny made it home, he passed away. He'd overdosed on the Valium he was using to wean himself off heroin. He was trying to get better. The guilt tore Neil apart. For a long time, he felt responsible, but being a group of men in the 70s, the guys on the ranch just didn't talk about it. Journey Through the Past editor Jeannie Field said, quote, "I think if we'd had a memorial for him at the ranch, lit a fire or a candle, it probably would have been a lot better. Nobody was to think about it. It was as if it hadn't happened. Business as usual." Time Fades Away, the first of the Ditch, was supposed to be a studio album, but after months of agonizing rehearsals, it was made into a live album, immortalizing Neil's worst tour to date. For one, the Stray Gators just weren't going to produce the gritty sound Neil wanted live. This was the Harvest Band with homey shuffling drums and sweet steel guitar. Neil was putting everyone through the shredder, but you just can't make a pop band rock and roll. Speaking of putting people through the shredder, he's made the reputation of not being an easy guy to work with. He's simultaneously picky as hell and fickle. He can change his mind in an instant. Drinking away the pain of losing one of your best friends is only going to amplify that. Neil would come down hard on the band after nearly every single show. The whole band was just as drunk as he was, by the way. The icing on the cake All these poor kids in the crowd who just wanted to hear Heart of Gold. Neil really resented this. He couldn't understand why audiences were so unwilling to give new stuff a chance. The tour came to a screeching halt in Oakland. The crowd rushed to the stage during the encore. Security started throwing hands. The whole thing blew up. Yeah, no wonder Time Fades Away is Neil's least favorite album of his. After this tour, Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young tried for another album. To understand the gravity of the news that hit after those sessions, we have to go back a little to the Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young days. Neil was really close to their roadie, Bruce Berry. Close enough for him to join in on the sound checks. Late at night, when the people were gone, he used to pick up my guitar and sing a song in a shaky voice that was real as the day was long. Bruce floated in and out of their inner circle until he showed up to sessions for drugs for Stills, when Crosby, Nash, and Young were all trying to sober him up. That was Bruce's last strike. But soon after, Neil and the guys got the news that Bruce had overdosed. Losing Bruce tipped something in Neil. He pulled the plug on whatever Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young were supposed to do. As Joel Bernstein said, quote, "It seemed to CSN that no sooner had Neil quit that he was back in the studio with his own people. I imagine they were very pissed at him. And why didn't give a shit?" He called up David Briggs, who produced his first 3 solo albums, at Studio Instrument Rentals, notably not a studio. Tonight's the Night was born. This group, very loosely called the Santa Monica Flyers, very loosely, the name changes like 3 times, it's made up of Crazy Horse with some helpers from the Stray Gators. Neil chose Nils Lofgren in part because he sounded like Bruce. Peter Doggett had a more romantic description of these sessions, calling them, quote, "perfectly pitched between inebriated freedom and total oblivion. Tonight's the Night sessions were just as much a drunkening as Time Fades Away was. The guys wanted to see how loose they could get while still being able to play." Ralph Molina said, quote, "It was like working in a bottle, but a great bottle." The title track, Speakin' Out, World on a String, Mellow My Mind, and Tired Eyes all came from one day at SIR, August 26th, 1973. They headed back in September for Roll Another, Albuquerque, New Mama, and the second, Tonight's the Night. The last song to come along was Borrowed Tune, which Neil recorded solo at Broken Arrow. The track listing of Tonight's the Night goes as follows. Opening up side 1, we have the title track, Tonight's the Night, followed by Speakin' Out. Then World on a String, next Borrowed Tune, Come On Baby Let's Go Downtown, and side 1 closes with Mellow My Mind. Opening up side 2, we have Roll Another Number for the Road, followed by Albuquerque. Next, New Mama, then Lookout Joe, Tired Eyes, and the album closes with Tonight's the Night, Part 2. Tonight's the Night was released June 20th, 1975, 50 years ago this week. Wait a minute. Most of this was recorded in 1973. What the hell happened in that 18 months? In typical Neil Young fashion, a lot. Starting with the movie. That'll be pretty quick to get through. Journey Through the Past. It was worked on through 1972, didn't get a nationwide theater release until 74. It's pretty weird. Here's the soundtrack, that's all. Neil went on 2 tours, the first one only slightly less chaotic than Time Fades Away. The first shows of the Tonight's the Night era came about because, you not, there was a rumor Neil had died. Reprise started drafting his obituary before they thought to call him. Neil confirmed his vitals with shows at the Roxy. Where this tour lacked slightly in Time Fades Away's belligerence, it made up for in its weirdness. The band changed names as the tour wore on. They'd often play Tonight's the Night 3 times in a set. In fact, the Chicago crowd in November was terrorized with a 34-minute Tonight's the Night. I cannot imagine that. And these songs were often so long because Neil would go on these rants about Bruce and Denny, and the crowd had no idea who either of these people were. Neil was wearing Nils's ugly jacket, sometimes a Richard Nixon Halloween mask. He played the character of a beach vendor, hence the "Welcome to Miami Beach, ladies and gentlemen, everything's cheaper than it looks." As for the set dressing, silver boots duct taped around a piano, hubcaps everywhere, everywhere, a palm tree strung up with Christmas lights. I can't help but think that's where Corona got it from. And a wooden statue of a Native American stolen from a store. All the while, Elliot Roberts is dragged on this 3-month booze cruise from hell, trying to steer Y back to CSN. It did eventually work. The reunion tour went on in '74. Finally, the music. The album we heard in these 18 months was On the Beach, part 2 of the Ditch trilogy. Part 2.5 wasn't released for another 46 years. A lot of this album, Homegrown, was about the 5th major thing that happened between Tonight's the Night's recording and release: the demise of Neil and Carrie's relationship. Tonight's the Night was also delayed by several remixes. Neil and Elliot Mazer insisted upon doing it themselves, which pissed David Briggs right off. He'd already done it. The sequencing was switched around innumerable times in the process. Joel Bernstein said in 1988, quote, "He'd experiment with songs like Bad Fog of Loneliness. I think Winterlong was in there too. Between 1972 and 1975, Neil had a lot of finished recorded songs that never made it onto an album, especially the 1974 period. By the time the clock was running out, Neil wanted all the studio rambling back in, of which there was a lot. Again, this whole band was 2 sheets to the fucking wind. But it'd been so long, and the tape had degraded in quality such that they couldn't make the sound fidelity match up. They couldn't make all the pieces sound alike anymore. The final Tonight's the Night sequencing was determined by... I don't think anything could prepare those of you who are unfamiliar. I mean, it was a jukebox musical. Someone tried to write a jukebox musical about Bruce Berry. You can't make this shit up! Once it finally came out, thankfully without the jukebox musical, Dave Marsh wrote the review for Rolling Stone. He said Crazy Horse, with the help of Nils Lofgren, helped remedy the, quote, musical difficulties of On the Beach. He identified a similar lonely, desolate vibe to Tonight's the Night's predecessor and another blockbuster that came out that year, Dylan's great comeback, Blood on the Tracks. Dave names Come On Baby as the album's highlight for how it acts, quote, as a metaphor for the album's frightened, haunted, emotional themes. The rest of the album strains to keep up. It's the efforts to keep up with Come On Baby's energy that make Tonight's the Night worth the bumpy ride, though. Dave says Neil is working with the same themes he's been working with since he emerged as a musical force on Buffalo Springfield again. Those being tension and paranoia, but with a new edge. It's sloppy, but no less tuned into the atmosphere of the album, like the Rolling Stones. I couldn't help but think of Exile and Goat's Head Soup specifically when Dave made this comment. Overall, Tonight's the Night retains a certain tenderness, like, quote, an apology for the sweetness of Neil's success. Bud Scapa in Cream picked up on that tenderness. He identifies the difference between the old material and the new that Dave Marsh was getting at. Whereas most of his serious songs have evoked their shadowy moods through indirection, these songs work through explicit narrative detail. Young has become a storyteller, an actor. Crazy Horse helped tow Neil out of that ditch once and for all with their November 1975 album, Zuma. I've never seen that album art before. Why does your copy of Zuma look like that? Well, you will just have to wait until later this year to find out. 1975 was a weird year for rock and roll. Stadium rock hit critical mass. Led Zeppelin rang in the year with their Made for Stadiums physical graffiti. Queen was about to release the biggest song of their career. Galileo, Galileo, Galileo Figaro. Pop rock is very pop right now. The Eagles and America rule the airwaves. Fleetwood Mac will have this slow burn through the back half of the year. The pop thing is uber sanitized. Think the Carpenters. The #1 song of the year was Captain and Tennille's Love Will Keep Us Together. But there's a subtle tug in another direction. 10cc's just released this odd but really good single. Brian Eno's working on Another Green World, the bitchiest friend trio in rock and roll. David Bowie, Lou Reed, and Iggy Pop, they're all in very different places in their careers right now, but it's about to get really interesting for them all. And a couple weeks before Tonight's the Night's release, out in New York, a band called Talking Heads plays their first gig at CBGB's. One wonders if Neil had his finger to the wind. He sensed something raw and confrontational was on the rise. But for now, we are still parked in this motherfucking ditch. What do I think of Tonight's the Night? Songwriter's name Neil, am I right? Despite his best efforts to throw us all off his trail, I just get Neil Young. I always have. Even when I'm not crazy about the album, I always find stuff interesting, honest and unmerciful, as they say. I lucked out with just about the best Neil Young starter pack any girl could have. Buffalo Springfield Again, Everybody Knows This Is Nowhere, Deja Vu, Harvest, and Rust Never Sleeps. It's a great set of records, but there's this big gap in the middle. After I'd lived and died by those 5 albums in college, especially Everybody Knows This Is Nowhere, I wondered what happened in the middle. I wouldn't park my car beside the ditch until my mid-20s. There, I found the real Neil Young. He was more compelling than the guy in the Daniel Boone jacket could ever be. Allow me to set the scene. It's the first random 90-degree day of the year. My AC isn't in yet, the motor in my ceiling fan is dying, and these little black gnats have taken over my windows. If you live in New England, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Those little fuckers show up every May, and there is nothing you can do about it. It's like 1 o'clock in the morning. I have to film the next day, but I can't sleep. I'm getting dive bombed by bugs. I'm sweating my ass off. I'm half naked, and I'm fumbling around for my vacuum to suck these goddamn bugs up. All this is happening in pitch black, by the way, because if I turn a light on, the bugs will attack me. I'm used to having my dad just a bike ride away to help me with the ridiculous stuff I get myself into sometimes, but he's up and moved again. To where I do not know. I say a prayer for these innocent annoyances, shut my eyes, use my phone as a flashlight, and swing the vacuum hose all around my head. Fuck me, it doesn't work, there's still gnats all over the place, and now I've made them angry. Cursing and muttering all the way down the stairs, I just stand there for a moment, deciding if I'm gonna brave my bed again or just give up and sleep on my couch with my dog. I'm climbing this ladder, my head's in the clouds. I hope that it matters. I'm having my doubts. Bugs are sticking to me. It's so gross. This absurd, totally absurd, but terribly lonely moment. Tonight's the night clicked for me. I'm not wasted in an empty room singing over the Rolling Stones, but the darkness I'm in feels pretty close. While combing the beaches, my anthologies, and the World Wide Web to see if my Lord and Savior Lester Bangs had something to say about this album, I stumbled on this gem of a post from the Music Elitists blog. From Patrick Vecchio, quote, "Some young fans may find the record to be too raw, too unfinished, or maybe just flat out too harrowing, and it's certainly not a disc to throw into the car to listen to on a road trip, but there are times, plenty of them, when it helps to know that at least one other human being is even more down and out than you are." That instantly made me think of Lester Bangs' essay on Astral Week, specifically this excerpt. If you accept for even a moment the idea that each human life is as precious and delicate as a snowflake, and then you look at a wino in a doorway, you've got to hurt until you feel like a sponge for all those other assholes' problems, until you feel like an asshole yourself, as you draw all the appropriate lines. But you know that then you begin to die, so you tussle with yourself. How much of this horror can I actually allow myself to think about? That's Tonight's the Night, really. We drop the needle on a piano unsure of itself, a distracted guitar, and drums that are quiet but completely sure of themselves. Neil's signature reedy voice calls out, "Tonight's the night." The bass echoes with a motif we'll get very familiar with over the next few minutes, often finishing the phrase as Neil casually drops off, but it doesn't stop him from building the intensity as he sings. Dark, stormy, heavy can all be used to describe Tonight's the Night, but its thesis is on the fly. You can hear Neil accidentally bump the mic with his chin or nose, people flubbing parts but playing through them anyway. I've often said that the first track on an album is its thesis statement, and the title track emphasizes what's important to the artist. In this case, the title track is the first track, and our thesis is a frank eulogy of the artist's friend. Bruce Barry was a working man. He used to load that Econoline van. There's an eerie similarity to the Cinnamon Girl riff. That song Bruce would sing in his shaky voice was Cinnamon Girl. It's strange that such a plaintive description of who Bruce was and what he did would draw us in. Maybe that's because we see Neil in his place. He sang a song in a shaky voice that was real as the day was long. Nils fills out the story. After the line about Bruce and the guitar, Nils plays a lick. The song builds in intensity. The bass lurches through the second verse. Neil croaks as he sings of the chill up and down his spine. Everyone pulls back as he drops the bomb.
Unheard that he died out on the main line.
We can almost hear Neil's eyes bulging maniacally from under that heavy brow bone. The main line is a vein that a junkie would inject directly into, but Neil's addition of out on makes it sound like a place instead. Oh, don't worry about him, he's just gone out on the main line, he'll be back in a week. Neil finally remembers he sat in front of a piano, and after some delightfully loose vocal running, he repeats the story of Bruce. After all, the line after introducing him condemns him to death. A sparkle was in his eye, but his life was in his hands. There's something bone-chilling about how he repeats those last few "tonight's the nights" in a quiet, mocking keen. Tonight's the night for what, Neil? Speaking Out is a bluesy dive bar slow dance about how much you love your girl, and whatever else is on your mind at the time, I guess. There's recurring lines about movies and TV, and a really funny review of the one he just saw.
The plot was groovy.
This leads to occasional poetry. I sat with my popcorn out looking for good times. Lost in the cartoon, I grabbed the lifeline. The music is delightfully sloppy. The changes come about as quick as molasses. We have a very rare instance on a Neil record. He verbally invites someone to solo.
All right, Nils.
Alright, Nils. It may be technically bad, but the motif Nils pops out with is one of my favorite things anyone has ever played on a guitar. He ambles through it like a ballerina in the dark, falling out of a turn, but her lines, the angles she creates, and the flow of her movement are still so pretty, it looks intentional. Nils straight up restarts a descent he flubbed partway through, not once, but twice. Maybe I should be annoyed, but it feels right somehow. Neil's piano playing isn't quite so graceful. The piano man was overserved. You guys are gonna kill me for this. Like, actually kill me. One of you in particular is gonna be so mad. But this sounds like something Derek and the Dominoes would have done. I'm sorry! But it also bears resemblance to the Stones' recording of You Gotta Move.
You got to move. I went to the movie the other night.
It makes sense. Neil was listening to a lot of those post-Brian classic-era Stones records at the time. How World on a String came from the same day as the previous two tracks is beyond me. This must have been recorded before Jimmy Nine Fingers came back from the beer run. The looping, descending chord progression with the turnaround make quick work of this song. 2 minutes and 25 seconds feels like a breeze after the 5 minutes before. Neil ruminates on the blockbuster fame he's trying to abandon. It's just a game you see me play, only real in the way that I feel from day to day. No, the world on a string doesn't mean a thing. When someone close to you passes away, your whole perspective changes. Your priorities are completely reordered. Living life means something totally different than it did before. everything is cheaper than it looks. You could say the same for bringing new life into the world. This was a weird year for Neil to be a new dad. No big life change has ever come easy to him. He said as much to Rolling Stone in 1988. Often in my life, I've felt that I was singled out for one reason or another for extreme things to happen. This was hard to deal with. It seems as though we've seen this party backwards, like Tarantino came in and scrambled the scenes. Borrowed tune jumps to the end of the night. Neil's friends have all either left or are snoozing on couches and beds, leaving him alone with his piano and his harmonica around his neck from earlier. One imagines streamers and glitter on the floor, bottles and cans to be dealt with in the morning, maybe a girl carrying her shoes as she stumbles down the driveway to an awaiting car. The headlights peel down the road, and we're left in the dark. The guy admits he's too wasted to write his own. He's just singing over what he remembers of how Lady Jane goes. It winds up being the most revealing song of the bunch. In a tender, hushed voice, as not to wake anybody or in hopes we don't hear, I'm climbing this ladder, my head in the clouds. I hope that it matters. I'm having my doubts. One of the Elliot Roberts-influenced editions was a recording of Crazy Horse's Come On Baby Let's Go Downtown from 1970 at the Fillmore East. It jolts Tonight's the Night back to life, and for 3 minutes and 30 seconds, it brings Danny Whitten back. He's alive and in the music, singing lead, urging us to go downtown for a drive, some food, some dancing, and inevitably some drugs. This is the 1970s. It's lively like downtown on a Friday night. It's bright and fun, like you're hoping to bump into somebody you haven't seen in a while and maybe get in a little trouble. You'll go on this wild adventure together as Crazy Horse goes on this wild adventure together in the music. But be careful, it's pretty bad when you're dealing with the man and the light shines in your eyes. Side 1 closes with Mellow My Mind. Neil definitely took this dish out of the oven before it was done. There's half-finished ideas, lyrics that don't totally link up, a situation that can casualize your mind. Even the band's not sure where it starts and ends. The ending strum comes way late. Neil's either sang or shouted his voice raw. He's straining to reach the very top of these lines. Side 2 opens with the ragged Roll Another Number. This might have provided some comfort to those seeking the comfy, cozy harvest sounds. It's definitely got a country slant. You can almost hear the harmonies Linda Ronstadt and James Taylor would have been singing. Oh hell, even Robin Lane on Round and Round. She is so underrated. I wish Neil brought her back. There are quite a few Neil songs about cars and driving. The man has like 30-something cars. This is one of them. We are rolling one last joint for the road before that last stretch home. Though we're driving back to the comfort of our own bed. Oh my god, I can't imagine having your own bed back after a tour and revisiting a familiar sound. Neil tells us the hippie garb Neil of yore isn't coming back anytime soon. I'm not going back to Woodstock for a while, though I long to hear that lonesome hippie smile. I'm a million miles away from that helicopter day. No, I don't believe I'll be going back that way. As soon as I heard the opening guitar thunder rumble of Albuquerque, I knew this was gonna be one of my new favorite Neil songs. It sounds like the older brother of Cortez the Killer off Zuma. Where Roll Another Number was about finding home again and being content to leave the past behind, Albuquerque is about wanting to escape to a new place, unsettled and just wanting to be alone. I'll find somewhere they don't care who I am. There's a crunch when Neil bumps the mic during his harmonica solo. Beautiful piano glissades. Ben Keith plays a line Emmylou Harris might sing. Neil knew how to contrast an arrangement with the grit of his voice. The waving, extended Albuquerque like a scarf in the wind is my favorite moment on the whole record. New Mama is another bright spot for Tonight's the Night. Night, presumably Neil remembering the joy he and Carrie felt when their son was born. But even then, he has the nagging feeling he can't measure up. There's something haunted about his admission of living in a dreamland. The harmonies recall the memory of Crosby, Stills, and Nash. I thought of You Don't Have to Cry with the lingering darkness of 4 and 20. Each morning when I wake up to rise, in the morning when you rise, morning comes to sunrise and I'm laying in my bed. Lookout Joe was recorded back in 72. It's got a bit more manic energy than the rest of the album. That makes sense. Time Fades Away was a fucking bonkers era. It's another song about coming home from a long time on the road and all the down and out characters you met there. Neil did meet a lot of interesting people in the ditch. Millie took his brain and forgot his name. Apparently the woman we were with took all our money. Look at that crazy clown over there. And Bill? A Cadillac put a hole in his arm. It seems we can't escape the presence of drugs, specifically heroin. There was a lot of winter sports happening at this time, don't get me wrong. Lookout Joe begins to sound like Look Out, Joe. Glory Hallelujah is another golden moment on the record of Neil and the guys singing in unison. Neil wrote Tired Eyes about an orgy/drug deal gone wrong out in Topanga in April of 72. Neil only heard of it through word of mouth, and he captures that perfectly in his delivery. Well, it wasn't supposed to go down that way. I mean, was he a heavy doper, or was he just a loser? Something about putting this story with a beautiful arrangement makes it feel like the end of a movie. Maybe this movie didn't end the way we want it to. The only advice Neil provides is open up the tired eyes. Not our tired eyes or your tired eyes. The album closes with Tonight's the Night Part 2, more of a reprise than an honest-to-goodness Part 2. This reprise makes me feel like I'm talking to that regular at the bar who tells the same story every time he's in, right? He's gone, so gone, and he's hoping the story will change, but it doesn't. It won't. He's still sat in that stool. He's still the reason your barbacks never seem to have enough Jose Cuervo, and Bruce Barry still dies out on the main line. A few days after that, I read Dave Marsh's Rolling Stone review, and he said something remarkably similar. Quote, "It feels as though Young is still absorbing the shock of his friend's death, sometimes as though he is railing against mortality itself, sometimes as though he's accepted it, but never as though he believes it." I'd love to hear what Tonight's the Night was supposed to be. I wonder if modern technology could make the studio banter match up with the songs again. I wouldn't be surprised if the Neil Young archives were cooking up an official, restored version of David Briggs's original mix for the 50th. Neil called Tonight's the Night, quote, "the first horror record. If you could shoot an album in the stomach and have it live, it would be Tonight's the Night. You can smell the blood off this thing. Dark, metallic, and crusty. Blood like that isn't red. It's thick and brown like mud." What was that love line? I gotta look this up. "The waters turn to blood, and if you don't think so, go turn on your tub, and if it's mixed with mud, you'll see it turn to gray." Everyone in that room was healing in some way from Danny and Bruce's passings. Everyone was so raw, and so was the sound. They drink to forget, but they can only remember. Tonight's the Night isn't nearly as dark as you'd think from that description. It's really weird. It's not a Closer or a Berlin or a Marble Index by any means. Tonight's the Night is emotional gore. These guys are grieving together, stumbling through music the way you fumble through life after loss. A while back, I hauled out to a cabin in New Hampshire with my friends from college. This album made me think of something really accidentally profound that my buddy Matthew said. On that trip, he said to me, "Bipedal animals are constantly falling. Walking is to catch yourself from falling over and over again." Tonight's the Night is constantly falling. It's shaky, but it catches itself over and over, or gets back on its feet when it does stumble or trip over something in the pitch black. It keeps moving despite all of the junk it pumps into itself. 50 years later, that's the magnetism of this album. Tonight's the Night moves like we do in the dark. Imperfect, but resilient and wonderful. My personal favorites off this one are the title track, Speakin' Out, Borrowed Tune, Come On Baby Let's Go Downtown, and Albuquerque. Remember, if you want to keep up with all of my favorites from all of the Vinyl Mondays, I have a Spotify playlist linked in my description. I update it every week. And that's it! That is Tonight's the Night. Why I covered 3 such intense albums in succession leading up to my birthday, I do not know. The subconscious does strange things, and I'm a 12th houser anyway. What do you think of this album? What do you think of Neil Young? Leave a comment letting me know. I love hearing what you guys have to say about albums that I love, and remember, despite what some guy on the internet says, your opinion matters. If you like what I do here, you should like this video and subscribe to my channel. I post new episodes of Vinyl Monday, Monday mornings at 11, and a new episode of my podcast every other Friday at noon. I'm taking my break week after this, just as a cleanse from the stuff that I just covered. It's a lot, and to prepare for the Beetle Girl miniseries on the pod. We're gonna have a lighter return, I promise. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys then. Bye!